Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Josh.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you for joining us on our podcast today. Today we're going to be talking about Marvel and all things related to the comic books. Whether you've loved them or hated them, whether you've grown up with them from the 80s, 90s, if we have any boomers in the chat, it'd be great to see. What was your experience back in the early days?
Boomers in the
My
chat.
good friend. So we'd really love to hear your take. And so again, we're going to be talking about Marvel today, how it's evolved from the comic book industry that Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and some family created, and how it's evolved as a medium, right? It's jumped from off the page onto the big screen and then gone on to streaming platforms. So, without further ado, first question that comes to mind whenever it comes to discourse for comic books, really, but for Marvel in particular, Jesse, what does Marvel mean to you?
There is like an air of enjoyment that a lot of people have when they go to the Marvel comics. They go to their favorite characters, they go to the movies, and they just kind of have that air of I want to feel joy in my life. There are some moments where you do have some dark storylines, but overall, I do think when people go to see Marvel comics, they're there to escape. They're there to feel enjoyment and get a laugh even. There is a lot of moments of joy and laughter and jokes, and so when people do go to see it, yeah, that's what they get. They get joy.
So I've seen Marvel, growing up a 90s kid, watching, particularly being drawn to the art, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I followed Jim Lee and Alex Ross in particular, some of the greatest artists
Jim Lee's great.
that I've seen, and they've hopped over to DC as well. So it's not as though they're any stranger to comic books. But Marvel, in a sense, is like the great American myth, right? Just like Star Wars is for a lot of people, including myself. But you have your modern day Greek and Roman gods, right? You have your
Right.
Zeuses, you have your Jupiters, Apollos, but you have them in the form of Captain America, right? The symbol of patriotism, the symbol of what America could be, should be, and always must be, even when America itself is not at that moment. And you see that connection with the readers and the writers in terms of how they're feeling about the times, right? Whether it's Captain America fighting the Nazis in the early 30s, 40s, to him becoming nomad, in protest the government policy in Vietnam, and then you have U.S. Agent, which we now have in
Right.
some of the streaming channels. So yeah, it's the great American myth again, but so well done in the comic book artistry that we know of today. Some of my favorites. I don't know if you have favorite comics.
It's pretty fascinating you mentioned all this American myth because it is kind of true. It's a very dark time, especially when you're coming out of the Depression.
Yeah.
And when you're going through what a lot of Americans were going through at this time of kind of hopelessness. There was famine. There was a lot of backwards policies of people not being able to get jobs, getting decent pay. And then you have like these small little strips of comics from these small creators, small people. Most people don't really know, but it kind of goes through word of mouth, comic issue to comic issue, people's enjoyment. There's just joy. There's escapism. I think they were pretty cheap back then too, so it was easy to just grab it off the rack
5
or
cents,
shelf.
10 cents.
Yeah, anywhere you want. So
being in
the 1930s of that era of the Depression into the 1940s of the war, there was a desperate need to revitalize some kind of hope in some way, especially for kids. So kids, young adults. So I would see that American myth of bringing back joy through these small comics, and even through adults. Adults knew about it. They got it for their kids also. It's pretty fascinating to see the evolution of that American myth as time goes on, and that it's actually kind of now globalized too. So whatever that fight was
For better or
in
worse,
in
globalized.
America, for yeah, for better
Yeah.
for us, whatever that fight was in America to revitalize some kind of hope and joy. I mean, you would see that also not just in comic books. You would see that in the movies. There would always be some hero fighting somewhere against the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Captain America was
Mm-hmm.
that big influence. Superman was that big influence too. So
Yeah.
there was just that need. The American myth. That's a great term for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you also mentioned, and I love that you said this. Superman was one of Stan Lee's biggest draw when it
Mm-hmm.
came to stories. He was one of his favorite heroes. So again, I always call Superman the kind of the granddaddy archetype of the comic book hero.
Oh yeah, first
Um,
action hero.
but kind of what you mentioned there too. There is a levity. There is a lightness of joy. There is comedy. There is action. There's adventure. All in these little scripts, right? All in these little packets for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, part of the genius of that comic book, especially back in the day, was you're bringing joy to children who live and breathe joy, right?
Oh
They
yeah,
are they're
they should
unburdened.
be at
They're
least.
unburdened
Yeah.
by the ailments of society. At least even at that time, children were working. They were going through all sorts of different conditions than we are today, thankfully. But they were the quickest to feel joy out of reading these kind of stories.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the hardships that Stan Lee went through in terms of poverty, in terms of trying to get a comic book sold, getting the medium to take off the ground, and you can kind of look at the comic book industry. You can look at the what do they call it? Approved comics.
Yeah.
Because of course the government has to get involved in anything good, especially when it has to do
Well,
with
yeah,
like
because there was
propaganda.
also propaganda
But
campaigns.
so
Yeah.
you and then you of course you look at again Captain America and selling war bonds to support the troops. It's amazing. You mentioned adults. It's amazing how easily a message can spread, both of joy but also of fear, of action adventure but also darkness
Mm-hmm.
in this medium of the comic book.
Yeah.
But speaking to Marvel, um, for myself at least, growing up in the '90s, again looking at Jim Lee's art, particularly for the X-Men. I don't know if you ever saw those encyclopedias that Barnes and Nobles and other bookstores would
I
sell,
did. I have
like
seen some of
from
those.
A to Z,
I
every
haven't seen them
single
in a
X-Men
while.
comic book. Um, but looking at that art and looking at the detail that goes into each character profile,
Mm-hmm.
their hardships. You look at Magneto, who, you know, whether it's the X-Men animated series or the comic books, he must always suffer some catastrophic hardship
Yeah.
to harden him as a child, grow up into the man that creates the Brotherhood of Mutants, and eventually becomes the very thing that he fought to destroy. And then as you kind of grow older and you follow Magneto's character, you see him become the hero he was always meant to be,
Yeah.
and kind of take that dual partnership role with Xavier. I'm kind of talking in circles, but
No, I get
it's
what you're saying.
the point I'm trying to make is within comic books exists again the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
That is the piece that, at least for comic books, makes it much easier to latch on to kids and teach them morality,
Yeah.
teach them ethics, teach them right from wrong.
Hmm.
But it
The old
doesn't.
fables.
But the writing back then, particularly in the '90s, and even when you look at Black Panther being one of the first
Mm-hmm.
Not Black American, Black superheroes,
Mm-hmm.
which was unheard of. And the referencing of the Black Panther Party, um, them taking that on as
Yes.
well, and holding pride to it, which one should.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you see that lessons of morality, ethics, courage, compassion, um, to avenge one's loved ones.
Right.
Um, you can reach a broad audience without destroying your product, right? You're holding true to the story, and your ultimately your product is the sensibility of
Right.
oneself.
It's
right?
interesting you mention all this too because yeah, there is a balance that has
Yeah.
to happen in between these comic strips, and sometimes you see it in like shows like Scrubs, where there's lots of jokes and it's a lot of humor, it's really funny. But you have to, as a writer, be very skillful on how you transition into the sad moments where you
Yep.
start getting your audience into tearjerker moments, or where you realize, oh wow, they're actually mentioning something here. There's a purpose of why they're mentioning it. Getting to the serious part, getting the emotion they want out of the audience, and then bringing them back to the levity of
Right.
all of it,
Right.
and realize that's
Don't keep
why I
them in the
came
dark.
here. Don't keep them in the
Yeah.
dark. Bring
Yeah.
back the levity side of it. So you mentioned the X-Men. You mentioned Magneto.
Yeah.
Magneto is an example of this. Again, back to the 1940s, we're going into the war. Magneto is a result of the Holocaust. He's a result of something very serious and very dark in history, in a huge part of European history, of American history too, because of the war. And they're
Immigrant
able
story.
to show this in his origin story. They're able to show this in X-Men, but also show the levity of the teamwork between the X-Men people. The levity even with Magneto's side of the team too, with people like Toad and Sabretooth and like the jokes they share with each other where they dig at each other. So there is still some levity and heart in all these characters. When they need to get to the serious moments, when they need to show and demonstrate, hey, this is the dark area, we need to get there. This is what we really need to tell you. Okay, now you understand it. Let's bring it back to the fun. Let's bring it back to levity. There's lots of influences here. You mentioned Black Panther. Yes, 1960s. I mean, X-Men was released, I think, a month after. I might be wrong about this, but the assassination of Malcolm X.
Yes.
So there is also an influence there between the Black Panther Party, between people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and the differences between peace and vengeance.
Right.
How do you fight people through peace? How do you fight people through just pure vengeance?
Right.
And then how does those two groups mash together? And that's a serious topic. That's a very serious topic. How do you bring that serious topic back to levity? And I think there is some skillful work done in stuff like Marvel, in Magneto, in Professor X, and the morality lessons he provides, not just to his X-Men, but even to his old friend Magneto. That actually reflects also on how Martin Luther King reflected on Malcolm X. So there is parallels here that I think Marvel is an expert at doing it. It depends on the writer.
Yeah.
It depends on who does it. But at the end of the day, people come to these comics because they want the levity. They want the joy. They want to be reminded of some things. They want to get the morality out of it. But a sensibility of morality, real understanding of reality, how people act, how people react, and then what's the movement forward. And that's a skillful writing decision by some of these writers. So, I mean, it stands the time. That's why we're still talking about it 100 years, well, 80 years later, and 60 years later with X-Men.
One of the comics for me that really drew me into Marvel, and I'll be the first to admit I was a little late to the game. When I was growing up, I did more of my Marvel intake from the animated series.
Right.
So, the Spider-Man animated series, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, some of the more campy shows, and then, Incredible Hulk. But I think one of the best storylines I've seen from Marvel is their original version of Civil War. And this was a more, I guess you could say, politically driven story arc. I don't know if you've ever read Marvel Civil War from.
I've never read Civil, but I've seen the
sorry.
movies,
Yeah.
but I do understand the story of it too.
So,
I've seen it,
and this is the reason being is if I'm not mistaken, it started around 2003, and this is around the time we're in Iraq War, and we're
Right.
talking about Patriot Act. We're talking about surveillance of American citizens. We're talking about Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, wow.
What are the ethics of detaining people, whether they're innocent or not? Depending on alliances, how far do you follow the government to do the right thing in the moment? But is it the right thing to do for always, right? Is it a reaction to an event, or is this a thought out plan? And what happens when heroes don't, take the time to really think about how policy, short sighted, right, when enacted, how it can impact society moving forward? So with Civil War, I think starting with Amazing Spider Man, his story begins with talking with Iron Man, saying that Spider-Man can be that cheerleading component if he would just reveal himself. and now the main aspect of the story being some superheroes. I think there were some mutants. I think it was also Namor's cousin, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they start this like cops kind of show,
Oh, okay.
and they're pursuing a like D class list villain.
Right.
Um, Problem is no one has ever thought about checking the powers of these superhuman people, right?
Yeah.
They're extremely powerful, but no one ever really thinks of the collateral damage
Mm-hmm.
in these stories, right? You might have a house blown up or a car flipped over or the Hulk may rampage through a town, but then the army is always there to clean it up. Nobody ever talks about the human
Right.
casualties.
The human level.
Civil War, you started out with a villain getting slammed into a bus full of kids, and that character's power kind of igniting a bomb, and it kills the kids on the bus,
Oh,
and it
jeez.
essentially wipes out the town from the map. And so from right then and there, the government, rightfully so, comes in and says, "You superhuman freaks have allowed yourselves to run rampant for far too long. You don't rein yourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
You have no government oversight,
Right.
but you have funding. You have the Avengers Campus. You have X Mansion. You have the Baxter Building. These might be private buildings, but they're on American soil, and they are affecting American people. And when you operate globally, if you mess with Latveria, you're going to have the wrath of doom come down on us. So we
That's
need
interesting.
more oversight.
So
Now,
at that point, Doom's already included. He's like, all
so
right.
they're looking at powers like that. They're
Mm,
looking at, we have superpowered people here, and we are constantly under threat, under barrage from these villains.
yeah.
But that's also because you exist and you have no responsibility the way you act. So again, the government, in their infinite wisdom, right? They tap into Tony Stark, who has his background in weapons manufacturing,
Sure. Oh
kind
yeah.
of a checkered past there, and looking to redeem himself. He is the first to go. I don't want my legacy tarnished. I don't want to have the blood of innocent on my hands.
Hmm.
I need to be the head of this. I need to get that at the head of this before someone else runs away with it.
Right.
So he looks at Spider-Man, Peter Parker, as kind of a protege, kind of his protege.
Are we talking about in the movies? Or are we talking
No, we're
about
talking about
in
the
the
comic.
comics? So it's
In the
already
comics,
like
it's in the
paralleled.
comic, but you're kind of touching on something here. The film, the film adapts it in a certain way, but doesn't go full in to the catastrophe of what it means to be a superhero,
Mm,
and then the cruelty of what it means to be that government oversight. Because
right.
just as powerful as the super people are, the government can be just as ruthless in hunting them down,
Right.
right? If they don't fall in
I
line. And
know.
we're talking
I
heroes.
know in the films, the starting point, the crisis point
Yeah.
for how that begins is in Age of Ultron,
Hmm.
right? Age
Hmm.
of Ultron when they go
They kind
to
of tie it in.
the I don't know if it's the Russian town or Ukrainian town, the one that is basically destroyed that causes Baron Zemo to come out
Oh,
after the death of his family,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Ultron, the destruction of that area. People are realizing
Sokovia.
Sokovia is the name of the place, of the city, and all this death and mayhem that actually was, if you really want to, was started because of Tony Stark's ambition to try and eliminate the need for superheroes to begin with. It was his arrogant attempt to try and, like, hey, we need to realize how much power we have. The end game, quote unquote, is us not even being needed. So I need to create a weapon that is going to be able to do the jobs that we are doing without us. And this causes Ultron to be self realized, to create his own body, to cause chaos, and then realize the real issue is humans and the mayhem that he brings on with that to Sokovia, which ignites this new policy from the president to, like, hey, we need to get these. You guys are checklists. You're not. You have so much power, money, and influence on our cities. We already had what happened in New York. You're putting a lot of issues on Sokovia now. what happened in, I think, also in Africa as well.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are causing so much mayhem just from even being around. We need to keep you guys in check. So it's interesting to see this balance of what you're telling me from the comics into the movies, of what they've taken from those comics, those core comics, and put together here, because it's very parallel. Obviously, it's very influenced from it.
You're also hitting another point, and we'll kind of go over it later. The films do their part to both adapt adapt a close enough version to the story where you can have the same, ethical dilemma and lessons. Somewhere along the way in this franchise, the studio, Marvel Studios and Disney proper, have strayed away from following what came before, but keeping the title of the story.
Right.
And so that, again, we'll get into that later, but that's become part of the discourse to Marvel's success,
Yeah.
or it's kind of decline in success, right? We're so back, and we've never had it this good, and now it's
To be
Marvel's
fair, too,
crashing.
to be fair to that too, I think it also hits on the fact that they realized, hey, which heroes have we actually introduced into the MCU first? We already have Captain America, we have Iron Man, we have all these people. We don't have these individuals yet. Do we actually want them?
Yeah.
I know they're in the comic version. Do we want them in the movie version? Because we haven't actually introduced them into their own films first. So it's kind of pointless. I think they even tried to do that with Spider-Man, where they tried to limit how much he was actually going to be shown. And it was actually Tony Stark that was like, hey, keep the kids' lines in, because you want to keep this just in case it actually, and they did, and it was phenomenal. I think it was a
I
huge
think
point
that's
for the
what
films.
I think that's what actually made a lot of the success for that film, for Civil
Yeah.
War. Again, the original comic for Civil War starts off with Tony Stark saying, "I need you, Peter. You've already been Spider-Man for years. You've been him since 15 or 16, but I need you, a well-known name and face.
Yeah.
You are the face. You are the name that is spoken about on at the kitchen table. I need you to reveal your identity. And I know that is your greatest fear, because you probably have the most to lose with your family, right? Being exposed." And Spider Man, looking at Tony Stark as his mentor, he decides to take on that burden at his own detriment, right? And again, that goes to the implications of doing the right thing, following up with good intentions, but a calamity pursues, right? So back to the film version, I love that they put Spider-Man in that film. I'll be honest, I almost didn't see it because Spider-Man is my favorite. Once they showed Spider-Man in it, I said to myself, okay, this is going to be an at least more truthful adaptation from comic to film. Again, the comic, there's like a catalog this wide,
Right.
of how
Of how
graphic
many,
novels,
yeah.
involving Punisher. Putting Punisher into a political drama is no hard stretch, right? You have Fantastic Four being split down the middle, two going on one side, two going on the other. One being, in approving kind of government mandating of superheroes. The other saying, we are for liberty. We are doing this at the risk of our own lives and our own families. And so it's no shock to me. But again, the irony of it being Captain America being the America that we at least tout ourselves to be, right? We wish ourselves to be as an American
Yeah.
people. Truth, justice, and the American way, to coin Superman. But
It's still invalid for
to
him as well. Yeah.
to go above policy and bureaucracy, to go above the chess moves in the gray area, Captain America being able to hold down the line and say, we cannot be forced by a government to reveal ourselves and be mandated, because what happens on the day that we are forced to go into a conflict that we don't believe in, but our government has now turned its back on the American people, on its own virtues. The irony again being Iron Man wanting to make up, to atone for his past mistakes and chaos
Right.
through his weaponry, and wanting to be a good citizen, wanting to be a moral authority and leader for heroes to prop up that bill saying all heroes must register. You can see
There's a good
the
intention
validation.
behind it.
You can see the
Yeah.
validation of both of these men are right.
Mm-hmm.
The execution of it is that gray area. So you do have Captain America working with Kingpin. You do have Iron Man working with Venom,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the rogues villains that are tied up and being released from prison. So going to the film, it's not as dark, it's not as
Pause.
character driven. Luna, sweetheart, what are you doing? What are you doing?
She wants to be included.
Why do you want to be
She wants to be
included?
part of the podcast.
All right, leave her in it if you want.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
All right. Emotional support dog break. This is Luna.
Emotional support dog break.
Luna is also a comic book fan.
She's
She
part of the
watches all
podcast,
of the
too.
movies. She is our mascot.
Our mascot.
TBD.
Mm-hmm.
She's our mascot, and she's a headache for her dad.
Luna
but,
girl.
yeah.
All
I
right.
should have put on your
No, it's
Batman cape.
Hey. No, it is interesting you mentioned, this guilt also that Iron Man has, because we did mention his, his.
And there it is.
No,
Don't
yeah,
say Iron Man. She doesn't like Iron Man.
she doesn't like Iron Man. No, it's interesting you do mention this guilt that Iron Man does have, especially after what happens with Sokovia, but I guess also within the comics as well. That of his weaponry and what his own inventions for his good intentions was for not for the world. There is always in these moments, and this is why I like these types of storylines, because all these individuals always seem to have good intentions.
Yeah.
And it is their execution that is false. It's faulty. It's them thinking when you think yourself in the right and you think yourself, why can't anyone see it my way? This is when the conflict really arises.
No two versions of good are alike.
Exactly.
Because those versions of good are all filled with ego.
Again,
and personal issues.
And this is a good human condition
Yeah.
writing of understanding the human condition of when someone thinks themselves virtuous, when someone thinks themselves in the right and going down this path, and why can't they see it my way? And don't they understand that what I'm trying to do is going to help you as well?
Mm-hmm.
But there is another side to it. There's the Captain America side. There's the people who realize how limiting, how much surveillance you're going to be putting on all of us, how restrictive there is also not just on their ability to do more, but
Right.
on their own personal freedoms to actually, help others. And always when you have, like, say, a government coming in and trying to,
Put its foot
lay
down.
the ground
Yeah.
for how you should move as a person,
Yeah.
how you should use your abilities when you are the one to understand it yourself.
I want to ask you, have you ever read either World War Hulk or Avengers vs. X-Men?
I've seen versions of Planet Hulk.
Well, the reason why I ask is because these two stories essentially follow hot off the heels of Civil War.
Right.
The reason why I'm bringing this up is because we talk about government oversight and just how it's a double-edged sword, right, when it comes to these stories. Because it ultimately, it follows on the heroes just want to do the right thing and they want to comply and they want to do the most good for the most amount of people, right? They want to be the most altruistic heroes they possibly can
Right.
be. But they are still, at the end of the day, their own individual people, right?
Yeah.
They have their own
They
concerns,
have their way of
their own
thinking,
families.
their own morals.
But
their
you
own-
look at a story like World War Hulk.
Right.
In World War Hulk, Bruce Banner, to no one's surprise, can't control his rage any further. Hulk is certainly becoming a darker presence in his life. It's taking over more of his life. And it takes him almost nothing to get set off. So, with the help of, a shadowy group called the Illuminati, they send him out into space to fight this fake threat. The real goal being sending out this being out into space to never be seen again. Read Planet Hulk, read World War Hulk, essentially what that becomes is Banner Banner has betrayed himself in that he's betrayed the Hulk by taking away his freedom of will.
Interesting.
He's banished him out into space, and so I'm bringing this up because we have a story of free will, government oversight, altruism, doing the most good for the most amount of people, and then how that can be ruinous to a society,
Mm-hmm.
to choices going down the line, and then permanent policy, and then you have Hulk being stripped of his free will, being sent out into space, goes through this whole gladiator kind of battle, becomes an emperor of his
Yep.
own, and then his world is blown up.
Mm-hmm.
And as he comes back and seeks revenge on the Illuminati, so you're looking at Doctor Strange, Professor Xavier, Namor, Black Panther, the X-Men en masse, and then the Avengers in particular. He comes back and says, "Look at what you've done. Not only look at what you've done to society, you've basically murdered Captain America. Captain America at that time is in a coma,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much the passing of the mantle from Captain America to Bucky, right, to become the next Captain America. Um, but Hulk, kind of from an outside perspective, saying, you all called me, the barbarian, for what I've done all these years, but I come back to you as an emperor willing to free you all from your delusion. But look at what you've done to society while the monster's been away.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it kind of ties into I look at Civil War and World War Hulk as start, middle, and then finish. They give a complete vision of what the Marvel universe had evolved into. It became more of a political drama.
Yeah.
It became more of a real world, modern day issues,
Yeah.
which is partly why I'm bringing this up. When it's written well, and then you look at Avengers versus X-Men, where
Well,
in
just to tie that in, because I
go
think
ahead.
that's an interesting point you make
Sure,
about
sure.
Planet Hulk and this beginning overarching story. Especially because I know in this time, there is also a need to kind of up the game for how these stories are told. I mean, there's only so many times you can tell how Captain America is fighting the Nazis again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
Captain
And the
America is
Red
fighting
Skull.
another henchman,
Yeah.
or Red Skull. You realize people are more in, they are in a need for wanting more depth.
Yeah.
And so when
That's
they're
the word.
able to go into these stories of, the mental state of someone's freedoms and the consequences of the actions of each of these heroes and the results of how they retaliate as well. I find it a very interesting dichotomy,
Yeah.
to bring it all together. So, yeah.
Yeah, so well, that's exactly. So when you look at Avengers versus X-Men, you've had you've had your story of government overreach, oversight, policy being enacted, heroes being weaponized as a form of government response. But then you have a story like Avengers versus X-Men, where it is about the self-determination of the mutants who've experienced this calamity of their population essentially being wiped out by the Scarlet Witch. And so again, I'm tying into these ideas of moral and ethical values that are taught to children that can be adapted to a real world adult's perception,
It's
right?
also
What they're
interesting to me.
experiencing.
It's also interesting to me because I'll be honest. Yeah, I'm not too tapped into the comic world of Marvel. I've read certain runs, but in terms of the bigger arching stories, like I have not tapped it. So I'm more of the film side. So when I'm hearing the story of the comic side and how they've able to take in parts of that and change it into the film side, I notice there is obviously original, stories from the original sources. They're going to have more depth
Right.
to it as
Right.
well. You're talking about real mental illness of Hulk, and Hulk
Right.
is naturally a mental game.
Yeah.
It's about how do you come over someone's anger, or how do you overcome your own personal anger, your own rage, and then the person inside of you
Yeah.
that just kind of lash out. So it's interesting to see the more serious but also more in-depth tones of the comic versions into the film versions, which are much more lighthearted, much more jokey. They kind of they tap into some of these themes, but it's more of a, because it's a 2 hour run time, you have to just kind of go through it. But it's very interesting hearing the different influences from the comic side of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I can't go over every plot point of these comics. I'm bringing these up for a major reason.
Yeah.
These stories, in comparison to what we've seen of late on Disney Plus and in theaters, in terms of drama, in terms of lessons, these are some of the more rich stories of modern day telling, right? I know there's plenty of stories behind them, and we can't sit here for an hour and go over all of these. I would, however, suggest some major channels like Comics Explained again.
Oh yeah,
Rob
Comic
from
Explained's
Comics
great.
Explained does a great job
Yeah.
at going through all of the breakdown for each and every single comic. I love that channel. Den
Sure.
of Nerds does the same.
There's a lot of great channels out there, man.
So if you can, follow those as well.
Yeah.
But I'm bringing these up because these are what the studio, Marvel Studios, has decided to adapt
Yeah.
into film, right? Because they are more drama driven, right? Secret Invasion, you can say that as well, but
Yeah.
it was one of the worst rated stories for Marvel. And that should have been the easiest layup. You have espionage, you have extraterrestrial affairs, you have action, you have betrayal, um, questioning one's identity, you have kidnapping, you have everything lined up for you in a political drama, a Jason Bourne of a Marvel universe, if you will. But the studio tanked the show in what they felt was the modern audience's call, right? What interested them. And so again, I'm bringing this up because the studio's chosen stories like Civil War, World War Hulk, to several rumors going around on the internet, especially within the trades, indicating that Hulk is eventually he is leading up to a World War Hulk story.
Yeah, we've seen some of those images.
They already introduced
of
his
leaks.
son.
Yeah.
They already introduced his son, Scar, like poorly, just poorly.
My man
Poorly.
had
He
a
actually
friar
reminded me
haircut.
of a high school football.
A jock?
Teammate that I had. Almost looks identical to him. They introduce these stories, but they have no reverence for the tone
Yeah.
that these stories set, right? In the period that they were released in.
Yeah, there was
You have World War Hulk, you have Secret Invasion that's passed, and now we have Secret Wars coming out. We've already had Civil War. Secret Wars is coming out. It's not a shock to me to say that the Marvel fandom is cautious.
Oh, of course they are.
They're cautious.
Yeah.
So I would say that I'm more of a normie fan because I don't collect issue after issue after issue. I
Yeah.
can't say number 100 after 500 or whatever, but
Yeah, I'm more of the film side fan because that's
Yeah.
really how I was interested. I didn't grow up with comics.
Yeah.
I didn't. That was not my world. We didn't have time to go and get issue after issue after issue. I was a huge fan of DC, but again, most of the stuff I would get from Marvel was from the animated movies or the animated television series, like Spider-Man animated series.
Yeah.
But I do think I want to go back to talking about this one part, which is the audience's caution for what's going to be adapting to now. Why Secret Invasion didn't work. Why Marvel's, which I watched drunk, and that's why I liked it very
probably
much.
the only way you could watch that movie.
You know what? There's like I do like what's her name, Kamala Khan. I do
Yeah,
like her. I
I
think
like the
she's very
actress. She's
lighthearted.
cool.
She's very adorable.
Yeah, she's
but
people.
in terms of the like the stuff, my whole point of bringing this up is, you're right about the tone. The tone has shifted somewhat from the seriousness or lightheartedness in the beginning of these intro movies into okay, now we're getting into the nitty gritty of real stuff like destroying cities, what that's like, how do we get the government involved now that the world understands these individuals exist, to the end game era. And now we're like, in a limbo state where we're trying to start something fresh and new, but something's missing. There is a tonal issue, and I'm guessing maybe because
The
of
writers can't write.
there is no, there is a huge aspect of this too, but I do think like towards even when the first phases were beginning for the Marvel movies, people began talking about the formula.
Yeah.
They started
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
the formula and
Yeah.
how movies begin. You know, you got an intro to a superhero, finds out he's got powers. How does he handle his new powers? Starts fighting the first villain, loses to that villain, then finds a way to overcome his own personal issues to fight the villain at the end. There was a but you didn't actually go into depth too much into the villain either. It was more of the hero's journey, not the hero into the villain. Anyway, my whole point was there is a tonal shift now where I think they got into the we just got to get project after project after project out because now we have dominated the film industry. We have 3 movies, usually sometimes at the same time in the movie theaters, dominating, taking out other competitors. You have a lot of people who most likely aren't fans of Marvel themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe they liked a couple of the movies, who are also Golden Globe winners. There are people who are, very good at a certain specific movie, and they're like, hey, why don't we rope you in to make another superhero flick for $100 million, $150 million? And usually these indie type movie makers, they have no idea how to handle big budgets like that. And two, they're not familiar with the source material. I can admit I'm not familiar with all the comic source materials either. I am familiar with some of the movies,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I still, if I am being given this job task, I need to do my homework.
Right.
I really need to get to understand the lightning in the bottle that were these characters, why they work for people, why for these specific individuals. And if I'm going to take on the mantle to do these films, I should know why they work.
Yeah.
And I should bring that
I should have reverence
naturally
for the stories. Yeah.
through my storytelling, not through a quick pace, maybe a few jokes here, a quick fight at the end, and then
Yeah.
we're good. It's out.
Yeah.
You liked it, right?
The
You liked it.
decorporatization of
The corporatization of the formula
of my favorite word, content.
of content.
Yeah.
And so once we got past the end game, I know there was a leadership too in the change for the CEO,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously COVID happened, and there's a whole lots of reasons we can give excuses too. There's lots of
Yeah,
excuses we can give it. It really does come down to the writers. Do they understand the material? Do they understand why it worked for fans? And then can they produce that in natural storytelling?
And are they in it for the right reasons too?
For the right reasons, too.
One of the reasons that I see quite a bit. One of the things that I see quite a bit. We talk about, diversity, inclusion, and equality, representation. It can go both ways, right? One of my things. I am for, maybe this shocks people. I am for DEI, done right. Okay. My thing is,
Ooh, we're going to DEI.
if you have writers, if you're going to hire writers based on their appearance, based on their, what is it, color, creed, ethnicity, you are not, and thinking that they're going to have different stories to go with those, right? You are not shopping for talented writers. You are shopping for trophies.
Yeah.
You are looking, any studio. It doesn't have to be Disney. It doesn't have to be Sony. It doesn't have to be Warner Brothers. Any studio will get called out on this, because if your move is to say the entire cast for, as an example, I don't know this personally, as an example, Black Panther 3, the entire writers' room, all of the directors, all of the studio heads, the whole crew, they're all black. What does that do if none of them have read the Black Panther comics? If the writer and the director, one writer and one director, they are the only ones who have some insight into the Black Panther story, but everybody else is somewhat loose in what they understand Black Panther to be, and then you have studio heads saying, don't read the comics, we're not here to do that, we don't want that shit, we want to make our own original. That is a disservice to the story, to the fandom, and to your own initiative, because you are treating the identity portion of these talented people. No one says they're not talented.
I can get into this.
But you are shopping out for people as if they are trophies,
Yeah.
as opposed to talented writers who can bring in, as you say, a more broader fan base.
So,
but yeah, get into it.
I do think there is a kind of progression, a timeline of this too.
Yeah.
I think it also begins with social media.
Yeah.
Because social media invited the people to really critique with each other online about certain movies, about the writers and the directors too.
good
And
bad.
so whenever you see someone like Blade was
awesome.
it was one of the best movies, and it was
Rated
just
R.
someone creating an action flick with a character to kick ass and kill vampires,
Yeah.
and there was blood.
Yeah.
Was it cheesy at sometimes? Absolutely. Him catching the
Campy.
sunglasses, all these.
Campy.
It was campy. It was there's all these moments. As people start kind of opening up as well to in the film world, not even like the superhero world, in the film world of, hey, do we have enough diverse, black members, Hispanic members making movies? Because there's a wide, variety of people that want to make their own movies, but they feel like there's no avenue for them to be given a platform to actually, or even funding, to create their own projects in Hollywood. And I think that also tapped into the superhero world as well. When you see movies like Shang-Chi or movies like Black Panther, there was, hey, the audience themselves, through social media, were able to say, I would want to have a black person do Black Panther. And I understand this too, because, I wouldn't say they may understand the culture more. It was just the person. You want to give the opportunity to the person to make a story about the character that might have some similarities in culture, in in the
Especially
real
for
world,
the time,
especially
the
because
lives that those
specifically
people lived.
with Ryan Coogler,
Yeah.
who grew up in Oakland,
Right.
He lived
Right.
in Oakland, and Killmonger he grew up in Oakland.
Yeah.
There is an authenticity to bringing somebody that understands that world. We live in I don't know if we want to admit to where we live, but
California.
We live in
put it
California.
We'll put it at that. Whether the audience likes that or not, you can make this idea that Californians are super liberal or super base. I really don't give a shit. At the end of the day, fandom has to rise above that. Has to rise above this identity politics.
Yes, but
that comes into the stories.
There
But
is also
continue.
this thing, because I do ascribe to the idea you need to have authenticity.
Yes.
If you start
Yes.
having some person who's outside of a specific, because it goes into dialogue too. When you write dialogue and you're writing dialogue using aesthetics of or ebonics, right? And
Sure.
and you have like a white person who starts writing about ebonics, but they grew up in
That'd
like
be weird.
Whitechapel Hills,
Connecticut.
and you start. It just sounds awkward, especially, and that's happened in movies lots of
Yeah.
times.
Now that you're a young adult, you'll need to learn societal do's and don'ts.
Sorry, bro.
No big whoop, dog. Yo, did you catch that new vid on the box?
True that. I'm up to snuff on all popular trends.
Word.
Yeah, you can
What
tell.
the fuck are you talking
Yeah,
about, dude?
don't do
No one
that.
talks like that in
Yeah.
these areas. It just seems so inauthentic.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying in order to get that authenticity into the realm of Oakland for Killmonger, or the dialect or whatever, for even for African countries, you have to have a black writer only. That's because only one. So black people have grown up in different areas too. What you have to do is have someone that understands the material, understands how to create a good story,
Right.
understands what makes those stories work. Specifically for Black Panther and for Ryan Coogler, it worked. It mixed well together. And Ryan Coogler himself wanted to bring actors and people in this world, give opportunities to black actors. And this is around a black character, African character,
right.
and you want to have the authenticity in that as well. So when I say that, that's part of it.
Yeah.
In Shang-Chi, there's that authenticity too. You want to have, in social media, people wanted an Asian director and writer to write Asian culture in Shang-Chi. There's an authenticity to that too, versus say someone like me, myself, who is, a mixed of background of Venezuelan, Mexican, whatever, and trying to write Asian culture. Now, when you have, someone, when there is this now necessity of, okay, now that we have this character, Can we get a gay director to do this? Can we get a black person to do only, if it relates to a black character in comics, we can only have a black director. When
Yeah,
we could,
that-
if there's an
that
Asian
I
character, we
have
can
to-
only have an Asian
that- yeah,
director.
that's where you
do-
start falling into
that's
trouble.
where you start getting
And
into weird
the
territories.
DEI. That's the DEI done wrong.
Well,
So again, I'm going back to.
I hear DEI. Here's the thing. I hear the words DEI,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand what it means, especially on the internet scale
Mm-hmm.
and the politics scale and all this. I want to really just describe the word as inauthentic.
Yeah.
Writing an inauthentic
Right.
filmmaking, where you're not getting real into the characters and you are not picking people who understand the material they're working with, especially because it's not their own material. They're working with material and IP that's already been created.
Right.
So you have to tap into the worlds that's already been created and send and write something for the audience to that character that love that character. And if you're just looking at a character and saying, well, this character is black, this character is Mexican, this character is Asian, well, the only way we can have this story is if we get a black director, if we get a Mexican director, or we get an Asian character. That's not how you make a good story. You have to have the skilled person who understands the material to make it. It has nothing to do with black or Asian or
Right.
all this stuff.
Right.
So you're getting into this. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying that's DEI done wrong, because that. I mean, you can. The reason why I'm saying that is because they are looking at DEI not just as a form of representation, but tapping into a way of telling the story, of having some background in that story, right, through lived-in experiences, and then of course giving people then not a second chance, but that opportunity to tell those stories where they wouldn't originally have them. That's not what's being done right now. You look at, for example, She-Hulk. She-Hulk is one of the worst rated Marvel series
Yeah.
that they've ever created.
I haven't even seen it.
I was looking, perfect example.
Yeah.
That I was looking forward to that story because I saw that as
You were interested in
the
She-Hulk.
original, yeah.
Oh.
Because that was an original Avenger character, Hulk, essentially passing the torch, or teaching his cousin Jen everything he knew about controlling his powers. But the studio and Jessica Gao, the director and part writer for the story, they viewed that as an opportunity of injecting the ailment of what it means to be an American woman, or a woman in general, in modern day society. And it goes right off the bat into Hulk, Bruce Banner explaining how difficult it is for him to be the Hulk, but through, meditation, through therapy, and, recognition of this will be who he will always be the Hulk. He can't separate that from himself, and trying to impart that lesson to his cousin, Jennifer Walters,
Yeah.
is then, I still remember this line, and it was so sour when it came off screen. She's saying that she is infinitely more burdened as a human being.
Oh, I've seen that clip go around.
because
yeah.
of
We have to make sure of your ability to tolerate distress and regulate your emotions, especially your anger.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you. So all of this just feels like projecting a lot of shit onto me.
See.
No, I'm doing this.
Okay, this is completely new territory.
how many cat calls she goes through in
Yeah.
a day, how dangerous it is for her to, I think it was to be on a train, how dangerous it is. But, and so the writer just goes off into, it's far worse to be a woman in modern day society than it could ever be for you, Bruce. So don't give me your morality, your lessons. So that's DEI in the studio's head, but if it had been done right, it could have been a lesson in mental therapy, because Banner as a character has always, before the Hulk, he suffered with depression from an abusive father. He had an abusive father, so he had an abusive childhood growing up. He had bottled up and repressed all of his emotions so that when that gamma radiation hits him, all of that is embodied through the Hulk. Banner has on multiple occasions tried to commit suicide.
Yes.
But his emotional side refuses to let him end his own torment.
Yeah.
And in that reaction, the torment then comes out and lashes out on society, making it far worse for
Yeah.
Banner to have to wake up to and go, shit, what did I do now? Hearing that as a story, again, I'm not mincing words here. DEI done right would have been, you don't have a writer like Jessica Gao say, I wanted to make a critique on the male fan base and the male toxicity that resides within modern audience. This is a critique of the male fan as opposed to having someone who understands the hardship of depression, of domestic violence, of violence in general,
Yeah.
of seeking help through therapy, through religious practice, and understanding both men and women. I'm not going to equate them.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we all have different burdens in modern day society. Some are inflicted by gender, some are inflicted by race, some are inflicted by religion and creed, but these are all things that a hero, a true hero, will overcome as opposed to lashing out at the people who are trying to teach them a lesson.
I don't think it's lashing out. Here's what I think it is. I think it's
You should finish
It's an
She-Hulk.
attempt. No, I
It
don't mean.
stays that way.
I don't mean that because this is not just within She-Hulk. This happens a lot in lots of new media and also in I think within the last 10 years, specifically the last 10 years of trying to invite new groups to come in and try to explain, I guess, the conditions or the understanding of what I go through as a person. And so when I don't think it's a lash out at men from She-Hulk. Again, I've seen clips, I've seen things. What I think it is,
Watch the
it's
show.
because specifically, I know it was specifically a group of young women writers that wanted
Not
to
just women.
do not just women.
Not just women.
But specifically,
mostly
a lot
women,
what I have seen, especially that scene as well, it goes to, hey, men don't understand what women go through, so we need to tell you exactly what we go through, and then you'll understand. But the irony is, when I saw that scene, of course, I had the same reaction of, you don't know what it goes through every time we get catcalled. You don't know, it's like, lady, you don't know what we go through. It's honestly just as a misunderstanding of what men go through.
Yeah.
You're trying to get men to relate to this character, but you're dismissing what men go through as well. Men go through a series of depressions as well, of joblessness, of mental health issues as well. And it kind of dismisses that entirely. It also dismisses it to the character who probably has the most mental illness in front of his face, which is Hulk.
Which is why it felt so out of pocket. And again,
I just think I'm
mentioning the aspect of who Disney. I'm gonna die on this hill if I have to, because I have the perfect examples of DEI done right, and that is, just to fast forward a little bit. DEI done right is what was his name? DeMeo.
DeMeo.
Yeah, from the X-Men animated series, X-Men '97. You have the writer from Shang-Chi, who is currently working on Spider-Man: Brand New Day. You have Ryan Coogler. These are all DEI done right, because these are people who understand the authenticity of the character, the backgrounds in which they live in, that they can write what they understand and what they've lived through. I say it that way, and I'm actually gonna do something like this.
Let me just close out real quick. You can go in a sec, but let me close out
Sure.
with the She-Hulk thing, because I still want to talk about this one thing. which is I know we talk about DEI done right, DEI in general. I know people usually get like a certain feeling when they hear that word now because it's everywhere across politics and online and all.
gonna
It's
keep on with
everywhere. So
politics, shit.
when we keep hearing DEI, it's like an eye roll, for both sides or whoever side you're on. But I think again with the aspect of the explanation of you don't understand what we go through. So let me tell you, I don't think it's a lash out. Again, I think it's ignorance. It's hey, you're also not looking at. You want us to look at your side, but you're refusing to look at the side you're preaching to, the side you are telling this to, and not recognizing, hey, maybe they also go through this. How do we relate to each other?
Right.
Versus you can't understand how you relate to me. Let me tell you what I actually go through, and you listen to me, and then maybe you'll understand. And then they want the nod, but that is not. I don't think lash out. That's just a listen to me. You need to understand what I'm going through type moment.
That is a lash out.
No.
That-
No, a lash out.
What do you mean lash out?
When a lash out would mean, like a
We started. See, I'm doing this on purpose because this is the commentary. This is the conversation that the studio, and I'll put this on Kevin Feige. I'll put this on Bob Iger. This is the kind of content, the conversation that they want about Marvel IP. But this is not what they bought it for.
No, I know, but
That's-
again,
you
this
see
goes
what I'm
back.
saying?
This goes back to also specifically. I think studios themselves do not understand storytelling. They
Yeah.
understand the business side of it. They
Yeah.
understand the analytics, what works, what doesn't, money wise, and like let's do that again. But when it comes to actually picking the writers who understand the material, they also don't know that. They look at the accomplishments of the past writers. Oh, they worked on this, A, B, C, D, but never, hey, do they have the passion for this project? Do they understand it? And then can they bring the storytelling together to tell to that market of the audience? And so, again, back to the She-Hulk, the lashing out thing, when I say that, I mean, there is someone there, that team there, who also I think they also admit they've never really
They never read She-Hulk.
read She-Hulk. They never,
weren't fans of
so they
She-Hulk.
don't have the passion for it.
Right.
They have the understanding you're working for Disney. You are working to create a project that's going to make potentially a huge money, and you want to write that story. And you're using this as a platform to tell what you, the writer, go through, or you, the writer, trying to tell the audience of what women go through. But there is a lack of passion there for the character of She-Hulk, and there's a lack of explanation or understanding different sides of the coin. That, hey, the person you're telling all this thing you want to preach to is the number one person that is going through what you're saying She-Hulk's going through, and that's the Hulk.
Yeah.
You don't tell that to the Hulk. The Hulk.
I don't think anybody has it worse other than Bob Reynolds from Century. Between those two, maybe Eddie Brock in a way. Those three need some serious therapy, and those three can each be a lesson in mental therapy and just camaraderie in general, right? Compassion in their storyline. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So when I don't know why I think of
I say this because I hear you use the word lash out. I hear you.
No,
use
there's
the
a
word lash
specific
out.
word I'm thinking of.
I know. I know you don't mean lash out in particular, but again, I'm saying watch She-Hulk, and maybe some of our viewers that have seen She-Hulk, maybe you disagree with me. That's totally fine, but having read Hulk's comics, having understood, mental therapy, what it can do for you, reaching out to a compassionate, support group to get you through your darkness. I actually like that you used the word lash out, because understanding that writer's room was not interested in reading She-Hulk, they'll do nods to little comic book plot points from episode or comic book number this, comic book number that, little threads here and there. Titania showing up in this one. These little D-list actors D-list characters coming in, little nods to the fan base, but it is in a way Jessica Gow's lashing out at what she calls the male fan base toxicity is more that the fan base in general, regardless of gender, understands the character of She-Hulk, and that is a direct competition for the writer's room, because the writer's room is told, don't read the comics, but the fandom has read the comics, and so we go, look, this is not Jennifer Walters' character. This is not what She-Hulk goes through. She-Hulk would be more understanding of her cousin, and because she retains her true self. She's more compassionate, or she's more charismatic as She-Hulk, right? She's much more, you can call it sexy, whatever. She's more confident as her character, right? She's both athletic, but she's sharp-willed as a lawyer, right? Banner doesn't have that. Banner is either very, no, I wouldn't use the word shy, but he's reserved when he's the Hulk. Banner is trying to retain that sense of focus so he doesn't lose control at an insult, right? But Walters is able to be herself at her peak and aid her cousin through his turmoil, through everyday life. I like that you use Lash Out because it is a misunderstanding of the She-Hulk character that Jessica Gao and the writer's room go, look, it's not our fault that we don't understand the She-Hulk character, but we understand what it means to be a woman in modern society, so we are going to, and this was the mistake, we are going to make the male audience that understands the character better than we do, we are going to make them the villain. You see the reverse chess here?
I could understand this in the response. In the response for how people didn't like the show, were making fun of the show. I saw all of that, you know? But in the actual making of the show, I would not use Lash Out. I would use incompetence.
Yeah,
okay?
I understand.
Because when you are writing this stuff, they're not thinking, oh, yes, and we're going to make the men hate us. Absolutely. Because why would you do that?
Oh, dog, I have the perfect quote for you. I got it right here. I do, actually. Jessica Gao acknowledged and even satirized the toxic fan reactions to the series by making them the villains, the intelligentsia, within the show. I'm going to continue. Instead of ignoring negative reactions, Gao incorporated them into the show's narrative by creating the villainous male group, the intelligentsia, who embodied the misogynistic and toxic elements of the online fandom. Gao knew in anticipation. Gao knew that was going to happen and deliberately wrote the show with a meta-awareness of its audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the director, the writer, knows who she is writing for, but she forgot the same people who were going to show up for that show. She forgot to also honor us by giving us a good story.
Okay, if that's true, and you say that's true,
and we'll post the link as well. I'm not going to fire blanks.
No, I will find it, and I will absolutely correct it. I'll post it right here.
I don't want to be. I don't want to misquote. I don't want to do any of that.
If that is true, then yeah, you're going to get the hate. We could also say stuff like that also in the Star Wars side too.
Yes.
When you don't have someone that is intentionally
I was so
trying
looking
to do
forward.
this.
I'm re-triggered already. I
know.
I was so looking forward to that She-Hulk show.
The reason why you know what, if that's true, then I will take all that back. Okay, I'll take all that back. If that was your intention, yeah, you are going to get natural hate, and you cannot complain when that hate comes to fruition. Yep. You just cannot. You can whine, you can get upset about it, you can hide in the corner because the anger, I understand on social media, specifically on social media, the anger, the rise of that anger and the flood of people online can be exhausting, and it can be much. But if that was your intention and that's the way you pushed it, again, I defer. I stand corrected, and this is your fault. But you know what? I guess the reason is I when I hear things like, well, it's because of DEI, it's because of blah 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 blah, it's about, then I kind of get a little bit. I really don't think it's as simplistic as DEI.
Right.
I think it really has to do with the individual person being incompetent being arrogant or being, not talented. And then when all those things come together and it releases,
Both of these can be
and
true.
people get upset at them, it's like, well, no, I'm sorry. It's just you just weren't good enough.
Yeah.
You were just not a good enough
You were not
person,
right
or
for
you were
this
not right for
project.
the project
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
And so when it just fails, sorry, it failed. It just wasn't good. It was not a good story. And so, but honestly, if that individual did do that, then
Yeah.
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 Sorry, I don't know what you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
There is the arrogance right there. To think, you know what, I'm going to poke the bear of social media. I'm going to intentionally piss off fans. Well, then, okay, you did it. You did it.
Now I want to. This is not a grifting channel. I'm gonna put light where light is due. There are some people in the online spaces, fan or not, whatever. It's up to them. Some people didn't really care for Shang-Chi. I personally loved that
I
movie.
love Shang-Chi.
That was a very good
I had a
movie.
great fun
I didn't
time.
know much about Shang-Chi. You can call me a
Neither did I.
normie in that
It's
sense.
okay.
I know that they created some, original elements around his story to better fit what they wanted to tell. But there is some. I don't know if you remember. It's not that far ago, but it is now 2025 shit. I don't know if you remember what it was like living in the early 2000s, watching the more campy Marvel films.
Oh, those early
Like,
2000s
you
were
have,
so much
you have your
fun.
Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
You have your Tobey Maguire peak Spider-Man. I'm sorry. I love Tom Holland. He's cool and all, but Tobey is my boy.
Toby. Sorry.
You have the Fantastic Four versions with Chris Evans as Human Torch.
I love those, too.
Brilliant casting of Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider.
Oh, yeah.
You
Person was
have
great.
you have nothing really came of it, but Eric Bana playing as Hulk on film, and kind of setting up Stan Lee as the ultimate cameo master.
Yeah.
The king of cameos. But something that I in the grand scheme of it, and depending on how Disney now wants to handle it, they've had their success, they've had their failures. Right now, and this is with respect, right? I love Disney at the end of the day, regardless of leadership. I love Disney. Disney is its own Thanos. and I'll say why. Each of these properties is essentially an infinity gauntlet. You have the Spider-Man series with Tobey, the property, we'll say the properties. Spider-Man IP, you have the Fantastic Four IP, you have the X-Men Fox IP, so also Fantastic Four. You have, let me see here, you have Blade, Elektra, you have all of these characters that represented that early 2000s cinema experience, right? I want to go through some numbers here. Hopefully I have the mic close enough. Just with the Spider-Man films alone, you were looking at over $800 million in profit. You're looking at the X-Men.
Just for all three?
For all three. Yeah, together. Right? In this early 2000s.
Yeah,
we
in the early
hadn't
2000s, that's still
We hadn't
great,
had like a blockbuster.
Everyone
like
thinks
Infinity
the $1
War
billion,
in
but
the
no,
billion,
it's
But for
yeah.
that time, that was fantastic, right? I mean, they kept making these movies, good or bad. With the X-Men peaking at $460 million with The Last Stand, arguably one of the worst of the films, right? Brett Ratner did the Dark Phoenix saga and Injustice in that. I absolutely hated
still,
that movie.
460 in that time is still exciting because people are coming off the back of the second film.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, you know what? I love the second film. Let's go into the third film.
Yeah.
And then you start hearing the people talk about it, you know. So
Fantastic Four and the Hulk both landed within the $200 to $300 million ranges. And then you're looking at your smaller projects like Blade, Daredevil, Elektra. Elektra had her own standalone movie. I don't know if you knew that.
I remember that. I remember
And then
that too.
Ghost Rider's two films, between 50 to 230 million range, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty big range, but still. These are their stones, right? These are the properties that, especially with the X-Men, Fantastic Four franchise, IPs. These are the properties that Disney paid $70 billion for the Fox Hulu acquisition.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Of course, they get a good chunk of Hulu, but and they get the Aliens and Predator properties. but you're looking at that X-Men Deadpool property. You can now have a full mergence of the, aside from Universal and Hulk, under ownership of Hulk, you have a full roster of the Marvel pantheon of heroes,
Yeah.
right? The full mythology is at your fingertips. They have gone through now 5 phases, almost 16 years of film, right? With a back catalog of an enormous amount of comics spanning, like you said, 80 years. Why am I saying this? I said it earlier. This is how much money these films made pre-Disney. Infinity War was one of their first billion-dollar successes.
Yeah.
That it was unheard of. And it ended with the villain winning, which was a huge shocker for the audience, even for normies. Because normies, like you said, you mentioned the formula for Marvel.
Yeah.
The hero realizes his power, he gets down on his luck, he has a love interest, he loses a few fights, he comes into his or her own, and then achieves the ultimate at the very end. And then with the linking, the branching of the characters of their own universes into the greater scheme, right? Into the Nick Fury assembling of Avengers, first ever done, right? Linking properties, linking films across each other. So essentially, it is a visual comic book. It was the first time that they hit $1 billion in a film. That created the problem of studio involvement.
Yeah.
Because now
Yes.
you're looking at such an enormous amount of money that the studio wants to keep capturing lightning in a bottle. Here's the problem. The studio is full of creators and bean counters. The studio, however, when it comes to making decisions, it's the bean counters
Yeah.
who want to keep capturing lightning in a bottle and is putting their will over the head of the creators and saying, don't read the comics. Don't do this. Don't give credence to the original creators of these stories, but take the name, create
Right.
your own original story, and because of the lack of creativity, I'm going to take off what you said, because of their lack of creativity, they inject it with the conversation of what you and I had been talking about with regard to She-Hulk.
Yes.
That's the problem, and that's why Marvel can't, well, maybe now it can recover.
I think now that they're realizing, hey, these projects are not working, we
Yeah.
got to figure out what's wrong. Oh, we should hire people to actually has the passion to actually make these films.
Yeah.
So there is a few things you mentioned that I do want to bring
Yeah.
up.
Go ahead.
One is the acquisitions from the successes of all these films and the attempt to acquire all of these intellectual properties so that they can create more films in the same light. That's just them trying to gather all the materials just so they can make more movies. The problem is when you acquire these big studios, these studios have been around. 20th Century Fox has been around for 100 years. Okay, when you try to acquire Marvel and Fox, all these properties, okay, you have to realize people were running them before you acquired them. You still have to have them run them in the same light as you acquired, because there's a reason why they were successful. I understand also the reason why they bought Hulu is because they needed to, the streaming world was exploding, and they also wanted to build a model for Disney Plus in the light of what Hulu was, which is a huge success for the last 15 years. Hulu was amazing when it first came out. I remember that. You could watch a show right after it came out, the day before, which was amazing because you didn't have to watch television the night of airing. You could watch it the day after. And in that light of how Hulu developed, they acquired Hulu. I think that recently just finally got finalized. But yeah, all of these studios were working. They were working like clockwork for a reason, successful for a reason, because of the people building up these studios, the successes of their projects. And if you, in your successes and with so much money, decide to acquire all these studios just for small properties here and there, you're essentially going to have them run in the same light. But from what I've seen, it's kind of been a dismantlization, firings, and then just so they can get the assets. And you're going to fail because you are completely minimalizing why they were successful to begin with. When it comes to the conversations too, of when these failings start to happen, and social media starts coming in, and you have these, you realize, oh my God, wait, why are we not working? We're a $1 billion film company. We've been making $1 billion. The corporate world starts taking over, and you start realizing, hey, I need to try to figure out in analytics what's going on here. Why are we not making a $1 billion? Let's get the people involved again to make these $1 billion. And then it doesn't. You're looking back and you're like, hey, something's wrong here again. What's wrong? Well, let's throw the director under the bus. Because you know what? It was their fault. They didn't do exactly what we instructed them to do. We told them not to read the material, but they should have been a good enough studio. They should have been a good enough storyteller to try and figure it out without having to do it. No, you picked the wrong people with the lack of passion for those projects, who understood those properties to make those projects work and to uplift them and give them a backing, to allow them to give the free rein to do what they do best, which is storytelling. Okay? And the last thing I want to talk about is when those failings start happening, because you don't do those things, and you use the divisiveness, you use the anger as a PR marketing tactic to fight off defectors, fight
critical
off
acclaim.
critics, fight off anyone that actually has issues with your projects because you did not succeed in developing them, because the stories were not good. You didn't pick the people to make the passion projects, and you're using social media and marketing tactics to have the audience fight each other online. Like
that's devious. That's playing your own fan base against itself. That is such a terrible tactic, but that's also very indicative of a studio that, number one, doesn't understand its fan base, or number two,
its material
doesn't respect it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's weird because you usually would have. I mean, you don't have the movie moguls anymore.
No.
With Harvey Weinstein out,
Goodbye.
and for a reason,
Goodbye.
Absolutely,
See ya.
the movie moguls are out.
See ya.
They
Don't come back.
No, no. But there were the movie moguls. Now, was there a lot of bad, things going under the rules of these specific single individuals? Yeah, absolutely. But you have to have, instead of the corporatization and let's look at the analytics and see how do we, business wise, AI, let's use AI, figure out how it works. No, artists pick the artist. I cannot emphasize this more. I will keep saying this because I think it's still important in the realm of storytelling. So anyway,
not if AI has anything to say about it. I will say this though, that was really well said. I would drop this mic if it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah.
No, but at the end of the day, I'm saying that these properties are essentially Disney's Infinity Stones, but Disney is not handling its gauntlet with respect for what came before. They are quite literally their own villain at the moment. I think, and here's the thing about studios, they will learn from an outsider's perspective, right? This is also as someone who'd love to work in a studio. But from an outsider's perspective, they will only learn the lesson until they earn $1 billion, and then the lesson will go out the window.
Have you seen Mad Men?
I have. I finished it.
There's this concept I have right now. It's in my mind. It's kind of like a theory of Mad Men. Mad Men's one of my favorite shows of all time.
One of the best.
But it's essentially, for people who don't know, it's a show about advertisement in the 1960s, one of the height moments of advertisement in America, where you had a bunch of agencies try and come up with that campaigns for marketing tactics and try and boost it in radio and television. It sounds boring, essentially, when you hear it like that, but they made it to one of the most fascinating shows of all time. But there was a core element in that show which I think you can parallel to how Hollywood and movies are being made today, which is agencies used to be separate to the client, right? And the agencies would come up with the creative, they would pitch it to the client, and then they would execute it into the areas where they need to execute it into. It would happen the same with Hollywood. Hollywood, you'd have the production team. They'd go to the studio. The studio would greenlight their project, and then the production would go off and do their own project. In Mad Men, there is also a moment where the clients start realizing we don't need the agencies anymore. We need an in-house team to work on our own IP.
Right.
And we don't need the agencies. We don't need the creatives. We can build our own creatives within our own company.
Right.
And they start realizing as they're getting more and more money through this advertisement area.
Cutting costs.
So you're kind of seeing that parallel also in Hollywood, where obviously you have these big corporations, Warner Brothers, Disney. They start realizing we don't need the separate production companies anymore. We
can
build
do it
everything
ourselves.
in-house. We build our own writers. We build our own writers up. The writers we want to see that push a certain story, we build them up. We don't,
We don't need that.
go through the ladder.
Yeah.
Our ladder of our parameters of what we set forward, and maybe you'll get a chance to do a writing project or a film production project. Now, are the artists still going to push through all that smoke and haze? Yes, because artists are still artists and talent still comes through. But for the most part, you are seeing a lot of the in-house projects being made, the sequels, the reduction, all this stuff. And so I feel like that is also going to have a huge factor in the next 10 years of what we're going to see, not just for Marvel, but across film. Marvel, I feel we're seeing that right now happen because obviously in Phase 4, that's why it's not. They're starting to realize this now. They're starting to realize this now, and like, hey, how do we have to go back to the Russo brothers. The Russo brothers made Winter Soldier. They did this. We have to make them do Infinity War and Secret Wars.
Again, yeah, they're trying to they tap these gentlemen because they managed to capture lightning in a bottle twice. They did both films, Infinity Wars and Endgame, and they feel that the blueprint of success, and I genuinely wish them well because this storyline, Secret Wars, both the 80s version as well as the newer version, I think Jonathan Hickman. Please forgive me if I'm wrong on that. I'm terrible at authors. But these stories for Secret Wars are some of the best. It launched I mean, an insane amount of profit just in toys alone. I think it was Mattel at the time. This was Marvel's version of trying to sell as many Marvel toys in as much of a plausible way as possible. So just pit all of the heroes and villains together in this cosmic battle of good versus evil, and then including an extra universal entity that is threatening the livelihood of all universes, or universe in general. Disney is thinking that they can capture lightning in a bottle a third time, because the blueprint of success and understanding of the Marvel mythos resides within these two brothers. I'm hoping though, I hope they're right, because the narrative of Marvel is crashing out, Marvel is back. Marvel is crashing out, Marvel is back. Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts. If you've seen either one of those two films, they're both good films, but one, in my opinion, is dramatically and drastically superior to the other.
Sure.
Thunderbolts is better than Fantastic Four.
Really? You think
that's
so?
a shame.
Yeah. Thunderbolts
Taps into. I saw it a few days ago. I saw it as soon as it dropped.
Streaming?
As soon as it dropped onto Disney
Yeah.
Plus, and that's kind of Disney's cannibalization of itself, because I chose not to go see the film in theaters after having watched Secret Invasion, after having watched Captain America, Brave New World in theaters. That was like a B- C+ film for me. I don't even care that Falcon is the new Captain America. I actually like the actor. I like the character in general, the idea. but the film was subpar.
You
It's
know
not
what?
the actor's
And that goes
fault.
that goes to the reason why people didn't watch
It's-
Thunderbolts in
yeah.
theaters, because
and
it was
so
just
that was
yeah.
my telling too. So that film was a B-C+, but Thunderbolts is a straight up A
Mm-hmm.
for me, and it was grounded, right? These are characters that I don't care about. This is, aside from James Gunn's take on the Guardians of the Galaxy, this is probably the best way that they could have introduced Marvel characters that nobody cares about and gives them heart, gives them real drama, gives them something to really feel for, and to captivate an audience with themes that the audience can understand and that they grapple with. And then you compare it to Fantastic Four with an explosive budget, right? You're looking at Galactus, you're looking at cosmic themes, you're looking at the
Yeah.
changing of gender, which is fine. Of Silver Surfer, in a way, it's a different universe, so it's fine. I prefer Norrin Rad, but we got Shellball. But Fantastic Four should have been a much more powerful story of a family. Good movie, right? I give it a solid B. But we're at this point now where spectacle isn't always going to cut it.
Right. No.
The Russo brothers were able to capture spectacle and drama.
Yeah.
And the way that they really got the audience by the throat is by killing half the universe and saying we are capable of taking, at the time it was 10 years, I think. We're capable of taking the heroes that you know and love and you've watched for 10 years on now
Yeah.
and annihilating them all without a second thought. And you leave the audience in a gasp like that.
I remember the silence.
Oh, I
man.
remember the girl behind me crying when
Oh.
Star-Lord died.
Yeah.
First off, I said, please shut up. You've been doing that with every character of this past hour and a half. I really don't care. But they were able to do that, and that was the lightning in a bottle. My concern, though, is Deadpool said it best to Wolverine. Disney's going to make you do this till you're 90.
Yeah.
Who else, what other studio do you know of that did something similar?
Well,
They saw a huge success out of one particular creator. This is your realm now. Mm-hmm. One particular creator, and they said, we need our whole universe to be just like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy.
well, I don't know if they want to make it like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy.
No. The point being, they won't leave the Russos alone.
Well, here's the reason why.
Do they think they
No.
can find other people like them that can capture the zeitgeist of the Marvel Universe and not be beholden to saying, we need every film just like Infinity War?
No, but this is a testament, you're right, to the creators who are the Russo brothers.
Yeah.
And I would argue
Yeah.
the Russo brothers brought that realm of seriousness even back further with the Captain America 2.
Right. One of
Right.
my favorite films.
That movie is fantastic.
So
I can
good.
watch that movie anytime.
Yeah.
There is a seriousness there. There's a tone where people are bringing it out of the levity into, whoa.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we're going to get to some serious tones of friendship between Captain America and
Political espionage. Yep.
yeah,
Winter
and we're going
Soldier.
to introduce the Winter Soldier. We're going to get into the emotional aspect of, hey, I'm just trying to save my buddy. And he's going through some mental stuff right now. This is not him. I don't know what's going on with him, but like there's some real friendship, moment there where he's like, I need to save my friend. He's my friend. And so they can bring that tone. Again, this goes back to the passion of who the Russo brothers. Russo brothers had that passion, and they could tell stories really well in a action-packed pace, in a pace that is not going to leave the audience looking at their phone, halfway through the movie.
Secret invasion.
It's going to keep them engaged throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And so I think the Disney and Kevin Feige realized that and like, listen, there's only one group of guys, people that we have seen so far that have been able to tie everything together. And with what was going on with Phase 4, the ups and downs of Phase 4 with not really understanding what you're going to do with Kang. And obviously what would happen with Kang,
Yeah.
with Jonathan. What is going on with Ant-Man? What's going on with the
Quantumania.
Marvels? What's going? Okay,
Multiverse of Madness.
they're there. We haven't even seen Shang-Chi's second movie, but he's back in Infinity. We have to, essentially kind of bring everyone back again. There's only one group of guys that have been able to give every one of these characters their moments in the stories that can bring the levity back, that can bring the serious tone again, and that's the Russo brothers. And until some other person, I mean, I wouldn't understand why would they not bring back Ryan Coogler again? Why would they not bring back Jon Favreau to do more? Again, like a couple movies. I know he's working on Star Wars, but hey,
I'm hoping
you know-
that they have don't. I mean, call his name all you want, but I'm hoping that they leave Jon Favreau out of it.
Why?
Because I'd love him to fix Star Wars.
Okay, yes, fine.
The man
All right.
is not
Let
Jesus.
the
He can
man-
only do so much at once.
Yeah, let the man cook
Help
over
him,
there.
Let him
all
fix.
right?
Let him fix that whole other calamity.
If he does take over and he's able to pick the creatives over there, and him and Dave Filoni or whoever, as long as there is a creative for me, I don't care. But back to the Avengers.
Yeah.
They had to pick the Russo brothers because they were the only ones they saw in their entire journey that were able to bring all these characters together, give them their depth, give them their moments to shine, funny moments, fighting moments, and do it again, because they have to do something here. They have to bring it back. They have to make it engageful for the people that have already left after Infinity War.
Yeah.
Infinity War, even for me, was kind of the moment I was like, you know what, I'm good. I've seen what I need to see. I'm good.
Yeah.
I still came back, because I love those movies, and I still watched Winter Soldier and Falcon. I still watched WandaVision. I still watched Loki.
Mm-hmm.
I watched all of these properties because, you know what, I still had to
Loki
give
was
them their
damn good,
props
too.
for what they did for all those projects behind. But, as each one came out, it was just like, all right, listen, I gave it a shot.
Yeah.
I gave it a shot, and
It's become like homework. I mean,
It's become like
Even
homework.
Feige has. This is his words, not mine. We've created homework for the audience, and we've created something of a. Now I'm paraphrasing. We've created something of a tedious experience, where everybody feels that they are required to watch the latest show, have watched the latest film, read the latest comic book to understand some plot points here, which that can work in a comic book. Comic books do that all the time. But for an audience that is going to sit there for 2 hours, the last thing you want to do is either give them a homework assignment or tell them that this movie is actually a commercial for another movie that's a commercial for another movie that's
Yeah.
going to happen in 7 years' time.
And you're wondering, why are they not coming back? Why are
Yeah.
they not watching every single project?
Yeah.
And you know what? Then you have issues with people not going to see movies like Thunderbolts or Fantastic Four. I liked both films. Thunderbolts to me was actually a fun ride for me. It actually made me think, hey, you know what? Maybe they realized what's going on, and they realized, hey, you know what? Maybe this is the route to go to. We need to not go back, move forward, but bring back the tones that made us successful, and not make it a project to introduce another project. I know they kind of did introduce at the end of Thunderbolts the Fantastic Four with the cutscenes, but it wasn't in your face throughout the entire
This
film.
was its own film.
It was about the Thunderbolts. It was about what each of these characters were going through in their journeys. The Fantastic Four was just a glimpse at the end of the credits, the credit scene. And even in Fantastic Four, it was about these characters with their own tones and themes too. Like, I love the themes of Fantastic Four with the 1960s aesthetics and
the
I don't know,
Tomorrowland
the
look,
hopefulness
the
of
Jetsons
their
look.
futuristic Jetsons world. I loved all of that. But no, I think they're starting to realize what it is. Maybe people will start realizing, hey, maybe they're taking us seriously again. I don't know. We'll see in the future projects. But yeah.
To kind of wrap it up, knowing the current climate of Marvel, both in comic books, in streaming, in silver screen films, and then obviously like Marvel rivals in video games like Fortnite. What do you think? As a grade, if you could give it a grade, homework assignment.
Okay.
What do you think Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko would give Marvel Studios today as a grade in terms of storytelling and engagement and relevance with its audience, keeping away the idea of
Well-
modern relativity, right?
I'll be honest with you. I think Stan Lee would just be excited at the fact that all his characters are on screen.
Okay.
I don't even Jack Kirby. I think he would be excited to see that Fantastic Four is back
Yeah.
and on the screen again. I think most of these guys would not be like, just like, oh no, I give it a B, I give it a D, or, I think they would just be excited at the fact that there is a huge wave of people interested in their characters. Does the excitement go away? Sure. Like every trend has its ups and downs. Every genre has excitement again. Horror movies are exciting again. So I think right now Stan Lee would be like, they need to get their shit together probably. I'm excited that Spider-Man's gonna have another film. I'm excited that Fantastic Four is back again, and that we're potentially gonna have Doom. So he would probably give it a B or whatever. Just for that excitement alone, or the happiness that what he worked on for so long is just here, and that people are interested or talking about it online. Like that excitement, I think from his time when he started, creating these characters of Spider-Man, I'm sure he's just like ecstatic that people are just even talking about it. If you want to go for us, the fans, we're the ones that give the grades because we're the fans, and we're like, you guys are messing up here. You're not doing well here. We need you guys to improve here. Right now, I would give you a C plus. I would give you a D, BI. It's us, the fans, that put that on. For them, the creators, like, unless you're outwardly just destroying everything about their characters, making them look like they suck, like, I just think for the most part they're excited that we're even talking about this.
Yeah.
That's even on screen, and that kids love watching Spider-Man or getting excited for the new Spider-Man again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was excited for Tobey Maguire's. I was even excited for Andrew Garfield's again, just because of the fact we're having Spider-Man again. Tom Holland's pretty good too. I still am holding Toby, but kids are getting excited again for Tom Holland again.
Right.
So that's what I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually I'm between those two grades. I would say that the three gentlemen would give it a B minus.
A B?
Yeah.
Minus?
I would say that they give it that B minus because, one, they're happy to see the characters are now all brought together. There are plans to do a soft reboot, however they want to do it, to give a proper Marvel universe on screen. Maybe a more comic book. I don't know how they're going to do that. It may be a little campy, but we'll see. A more comic book accurate of the Marvel universe with everybody included finally. But there have been some writing mishaps. There have been some misunderstanding of the IPs, of the characters, their motivations, just the world that they live in, the way that they would speak to each other, and then the writers for themselves not wanting to hold themselves to the standard of not what the fans think, but themselves being the fan that grew up with these stories. What do they think? How do they write and understand that character? Without that background knowledge, you from a fan perspective, I can see the C plus, right? But those three, having been the creators, finally seeing all of their work, and obviously there's more than just them. You can go down the list like Rob Liefeld for Deadpool, right? Who's at odds with Marvel
Right now at this point, yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously we want to include that gentleman too. Sorry that I didn't earlier, but I would say right now they would grade it as an overall B minus in the universe. There is room for improvement. There is the bruises of failure, of arrogance, of thinking Marvel can do no wrong in terms of the stories that they tell, that the lessons and morality and ethics that they want to push in the modern day, whether they think they're being translated well or not, is another story, right? The motivations behind telling those lessons onto the screen, Disney Marvel has, I hope, learned those lessons and said, we can't keep trying to push content. We have to go back to basics. And it's not formulaic.
It's not.
It's story driven.
Yep. And to that, Jesse's main number one critique, okay? It's been my critique of most Marvel films, and I got to give the Russo brothers the credit to this because they actually, if you watch their films, they take this aspect seriously. If you watch their films, they do what I'm about to say. Build up your villains. Yeah. Captain America 2, Winter Soldier was a great villain. Okay? He was already established, but he was built up. Baron Zemo in Civil War is a good villain. He's a man that's been crossed, lost a lot, and wants to just see the chaos happen where they fight each other. He is a great villain. Thanos is a great villain.
Yeah. Your hero is only as believable as your villain is terrifying.
As your obstacle that is blocking you from being able to do good. And that challenges your heroes in a way that no one else can. Build up your villains. That's been my critique. That's a critique I know everyone else has been talking about because of formula, whatever. That's my number one critique. Do that. Take that seriously and give your heroes something to fight against, really fight against, with their own personal interests. Back to our beginning, which is villains also think they're always right.
Yeah.
That they're in the right. Thanos thought he was so right.
Mm-hmm.
Killmonger thought he was so right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why they were successful villains.
Mm-hmm.
Build up your villains, give them that sense of morality, of what they actually believe in, that they're the ones in the right, and give your heroes something to fight against. That's my number one critique.
My number one critique, I think my only critique, stop criticizing your fan base. Stop thinking you're the smartest one in the room.
Listen to 'em.
You clearly paid. How much did they pay for? This is the one thing that I didn't look up. How much did they pay Stan Lee for Marvel proper? They paid Hulu Fox. They paid Hulu Fox $70 billion just for their properties, and it's not just X-Men and Fantastic Four and all them. They got other things out of it, but it was the big puzzle piece to connect everything. They couldn't even use the word mutant in Age of Ultron because they did not have the right to the word mutant, so they had to say special gifts, right? In reference to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Just like with Lucasfilm, you know what you paid for. You didn't pay for the IP. You paid for the significance that it holds in the fan base heart. So my one and only critique is stop criticizing your fan base. It's not about writing at our level. It's not about dumbing down the content. Stop looking at it as content, but don't write the story down so that it doesn't go over our head. The point is, write a story that we can all connect with, and you start by hiring people that have already connected with this story from a previous rendition, whether it was a comic book, graphic novel, cartoon. If they didn't grow up in the world of Marvel, they should not be in your writer's room, bar none. The concept of we need to broaden our audience and bringing in a normie fan base. You know how you do that? When Marvel wasn't even a thing, you already had the serials of Superman in the newspapers, right? Those old cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
You started it with the kids being interested in these little adventures. Your basic stories are teaching the morals that we should all understand, right from wrong. Stop diving into the gray areas of what makes an adult, because that becomes depressing. You need to lift people up. So if you wanna have your darker stories, You can have all of your drama,
You have to earn it.
but you have to earn it.
Yeah.
And you start by hiring people that understand those stories and are not going to say, well, my real world, my truth, right? My truth is that I have been oppressed by XYZ, or ABC does not identify the way I do. You don't start there. You start with Daredevil is a perfect hero to talk about disabilities and how one can use disabilities to their advantage. You start with Professor Xavier hasn't been able to walk on his own 2 feet, but he is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe.
He's very intelligent.
Not just because of his
Wise.
prowess with his abilities, but with his intuition and with his academia, right? He is the head professor of his own school for a reason. And then he brings on this misfit band of characters who have their own struggles. Why does this man, who can't even sometimes control the processes of his mind, why does he get to have tutelage over these children and essentially create an army of his own?
Yeah.
It's because he has the wisdom and fatherhood-like experience that a man should have when he takes on children.
Agreed.
These are the stories that you want your writers to explain to the studio heads. And if that studio head tells you in the writer's room, don't bring me that comic book dialogue, I'm not a comic book person, it's not that the person that's giving you the dialogue is the wrong person for the room. It's the studio head that shouldn't be there giving notes.
Well, with that said, everything else, Dad?
We'll see you in 2026 for Doomsday.
Build up your villains. Okay, well, guys, thank you very much for joining us for this third part of the podcast. My name is Jesse.
Still Josh here.
Bye, everybody.